I've spent 18 months and £100,000 interviewing some of the world's best entrepreneurs whose companies are valued collectively at just under £15 billion. And I have worked weekends, nights, trying to make this podcast work as a media business. And I have failed dramatically, painfully, heart-wrenchingly. And here I am going to share everything. I'm going to give you a peek under the hood, a little look inside the kimono, such that if you're looking to build a podcast or a media business, then you don't make the same mistakes I have done and pour your money down the drain and wave bye to it. The structure of this episode will be the first 5 lessons are from my guests, and those are some of my favorite takeaways from the past 50 episodes. The next 5 lessons are going to be around building a podcast or media business. I'm going to show you my P&L as well, full transparency. And the last 5 are going to be my general philosophical diary thought reflections on why we build in general and who we are and how we can build sustainably. Fair warning, this is going to get uncomfortably honest. So strap in. The first lesson is from Julian Metcalf, who co-founded Pret, Manger and Itsu, about how it's the job of a leader to get to the truth.
What advice would I most often give? And I referred you to the most important thing of all. The truth is what I talked to you about. Generally speaking, the people who are worthy of your admiration are people who stick with the truth. And in business, it's particularly important. If you make a product and you expect people to buy that product, you've got to be brutally honest about that product and about your service and about your marketing and about your effectiveness. You can't kid yourself. You do have to believe in your product, obviously, but it's equally helpful to be unbelievably honest about how effective it is, how good it is, how good you are at doing what it is you're trying to do. All my life, I've had people come to me saying, here, I would like you to buy this extraordinary product. And that you say, why is it extraordinary and why might I buy it? And then when you compare it to other products, it's very often far worse. And not even not less expensive or anything. So you have to ask them, why would I buy this product? And the simple answer is that it's because they've put a lot of work into it. But how does that affect our customers? Or do you see what I mean? You've got to stick with the truth.
That sounds like truth that's customer facing in terms of your marketing. What about truth when it comes to
Well, they're related.
internal?
They're related, aren't they? Do you have the guts and the discipline to face the truth and accept the truth about your own self-discipline, about your own commitment to your product? Or are you kidding yourself? You know? And then, of course, there's the subject of the truth with how you work with people. Building trust with the people you work with is incredibly important. I think you'll find most really great leaders they know how to build trust. Trust is high. Very difficult to motivate people unless they, some people motivate people with fear, but trust works better.
We'll touch on trust building in a moment, but What part of company building do you find entrepreneurs or business owners and leaders deceiving themselves with the most?
I think. I don't know what percentage of businesses don't work out. Do you?
Very high.
Very, very high. Well, on the whole, the single biggest explanation for that is a lack of truth. It's as simple as that. In other words, the person starting the business wasn't prepared to engage in the reality of their service or their product or whatever it was. They were just living in cuckoo land. You do need to live up to a point in cuckoo land because you have to believe in something. You have to believe in your vision for something. So that's brave and unusual. But then you also have to apply common sense and reality to that.
So the balance is being obsessed or living in cuckoo land when it comes to your vision and what you believe the world could look like, and then being very realistic about what it is today.
It's not that complicated. If you apply it to, let's say, I watched a TV program the other day about Dyson and his Hoover. And I don't know how many thousands of failed attempts he had at making that thing, but he believed that if he could only conquer that technology, and he could suck up the dust more effectively and not put it in a bag, he would one day sell a product which is more effective at picking up dust. Then he realized it had to look, it was going to be more expensive, so it had to look fantastic, feel fantastic. The marketing had to be fantastic. The product had to work over and over again. So it calls for a level of vision and commitment and honesty.
Lesson number 2 is from Sharmadean Reid, who co-founded the Stack World, on how we should build networks of power. Can you speak more about networks and specifically networks of power?
I think I've been obsessed with power for a very long time, because I wouldn't say I ever felt powerless, but I was definitely aware that my circumstances of growing up in Wolverhampton weren't powerful within the society that I existed in, which is the UK. And I've always been curious about how power worked. And when I was 16, I used to be a waitress at a hotel that hosted the Men's Rotary Club of Wolverhampton. So Rotary clubs are men's business clubs. They just come for dinner, they sit and chat. And it's not even chatting about business, but obviously networking and business happens. So I used to be this little waitress, serving peas, silver service. And it was the first time that I saw a network of power. And all of these guys, because it was just men, decided what happened in my city. And slowly, as I moved to London, I noticed more networks like that, and more and more and more. And then you understand how London or the City of London or any large institutions globally have built. And they are built on these fairly intimate communities, crews, networks of power, whether it is Gentlemen's Clubs of London or G7, So with the Stack World, when we launched, we did a lot of communication around what power and networks meant and how networks of power would ultimately decide how you lived your life, how you were allowed to exist in your body, the laws that would be made around you, and that if you didn't attempt to either infiltrate them or create your own, you would be consumed by a group of people that didn't represent your interests. And we spoke about that a lot. We had Professor Hannah Dawson come and talk about women's history of networks and power, and just kind of role model what it might look like if the Stack World was a new power network. And one of the essays in the book is called Act as an Alumna, which is one of the ways that you can put that into action. So, by giving back to the institutions or creating networks around the institutions you're a part of, you're effectively maintaining this seat of power within a women's organisation. So it's always been interesting to me. What I would say is that before I felt confident about my own power, I definitely was quite preoccupied with infiltrating quite old masculine seats of power. So it might have been, an award around something or being part of certain clubs. You get to a point in your life and you get invited to be part of loads of clubs, and I'll be like, which one is going to have the most impact? Which one's going to give me the most reach of power is kind of how I'm looking at it. Who else is in the club? What can I learn from them? What can I gain from them? And then over time, I thought, do I even want to be in this? Because you don't notice it straight away, but it does get grating to constantly be the only one in the room who looks like you. So when you're infiltrating, you are still very much an outsider. That is the point of the word, you're an outsider who's coming into a network. And it's fun to prove that you can, as a personal challenge, infiltrate a network. But then when you're there, it's almost like wanting to get into a club, and then when you go into the club, no one's having a good time, you know? Like when you're there, you're like, do I even have fun here? Is there any point in me being here? Is this useful? So now what I'm really interested in, not just now, since the stack, so like for the last 3 years, is how do you build your own power network? And we use that phrase a lot in our marketing for the stack. Build your own network, build your own table. I talk a lot about how peer groups are important when you're starting out. A lot of people are obsessed with being like networking up, meeting famous people or people who are really experienced in business. I'm like, who else is on the same path as you? Because in 10 years' time, you're all going to be in some level of power. And that's how people help each other. So like when I spoke about my friend with the beauty brand, I've known her for 13 years. Do you know what I mean? Maybe 14 years, actually. I was pregnant when I met her. And we've grown together. We've been through it all. We've seen it all. When you look at 50, 60-year-old men playing golf on the golf course, they typically will have known each other for a very, very long time. And I think maintaining that consistency in the network is critical in order to build that trust and build that power. So yeah, that's my approach to it. And I'm always a starter of circles, and sometimes I have to rein it in because I start too many things and can't maintain them all. But I don't think a day might go by where I don't think, oh, why don't I start a literary salon? Or, oh, I'm going to start a supper club. I don't think one day goes by. And then I have to remember, no, got no time, got work to do.
And you mentioned before that there's a difference between men and women with their consistency with these networks.
You know, like I said about the guys on the golf course who've known each other for 20 years, it takes a very long time to build a relationship with someone of trust. I can't remember the exact figures, but it was something like 90 hours of FaceTime before you can truly call someone a friend or an ally. And I think to do that, you have to put in the consistency. But because women have been taught from a very young age to put others before themselves, there's often a lack of consistency because there will always be something that takes precedence.
Lesson number 3 is from Bernard Niesner, who co-founded Busuu, the language learning app, on how we should operationalize our culture through actionable behaviors.
And in that moment, when I was kind of probably sitting by myself in these dark, shiny new offices where everyone had left, that definitely was one of the darkest moments I had at Busuu, because I was working 7 years into that and nearly saw everything I ever built falling apart in front of me. I also swore to myself that, you know, if I'm able to do this again, which I was thanks to the investment, I want to build a completely different organization. I want to build a business that is really culture driven, with people that are aligned, that love working here, that really enjoy coming to the office. And that's what I did. I actually, with the help of an external consultant, we did a lot of thoughts into how to build a culture first business. And, we then started to properly define our values, which I believe, you need to do as a founder, because it's something that's very close to your own heart. And you need to build something that actually you enjoy coming to work to that place every day. And we then did workshops with the team, and we defined, the core values, but then most importantly, we operationalized through so-called actionable behaviors. And that then really helped us to build a highly aligned team, which brought us to success up to when we were about 200 people.
Wow. So many elements of that story I'd love to dive into. But let's stay on the culture train. Can you take us through any really impactful exercises that you did with these external consultants when you brought them in?
Yeah. So I think definitely the first lesson is that the core values of the business need to be defined by the founding team. And at that time, my co-founder had already left the business. He decided to move on. So it was kind of myself. And I think I really sat down and thought, okay, what are the values that are close to my heart? And these values, I think they're even still with the business up until now, even after the acquisition. It's the teach values, it's trust, effectiveness, ambition, curiosity, and happiness. And I would say that if I were to ask Busuu people or employees, ex-employees today, even at 4 a.m. in the morning, and I would ask them what are the core values of Busuu, they would be able to recite those, because we were so much talking about it, but so I think ingraining these values into the day-to-day operations. But the values trust or effectiveness or ambition mean a lot of different things to different people. It's very blurry. It's the typical thing that people put on a poster in the kitchen next to the ping pong table, but it doesn't mean anything. So I think the biggest learning really is culture for me is, values times behaviors. It's really like, what people do when no one is looking. So you want to act people upon certain values, because everyone takes thousands of micro decisions every day when they are working. How to write these emails, how to talk in a one-on-one with this person, how to behave in an offsite or whatever it might be. All of these are, thousands of decisions that people take. And ideally, you have alignments among the team, how success looks like. What's actually our definition of ambition? What does that actually mean? Or how do we foster curiosity within the organization? So we operationalized these values. Each of them had so-called actionable behaviors: celebrate the team, or go the extra mile, or become the best version of yourself in terms of curiosity, for example, that we try to really explain what does it mean to be curious. And that we did together with external consultants, where we then also, I guess, had the team involved. We did one big offsite in Croatia where we hired an entire island and took, I think at that time, about 100 people to that island, and really, I think, explained again the values and the behaviors to the team, but also got their input, and there was refinement of some of these values, because also it's a living organization, a business, and that's why it needs to evolve. Whatever works with 20 people does not work with 50 and doesn't work beyond the 100 people. So I think there was obviously some sort of participation of the team to make sure that everyone is also on board with that.
Lesson 4 is from Atalana Pignon, who co-founded Retorna, on how we should count the pennies and the millions will count themselves.
That happened because we were in a good position to fundraise. If they say no, we just carry on doing business because we were profitable. We had 750,000 in the bank account, and it was no problem for us to not raise. What the problem was to not grow at the pace we wanted to grow. But when you are looking for the right partner, the right investor, you can wait a bit longer because it's a good fit for a future. And when you say yes to an investor that you might not connect just because you need the money, then that will affect you in the future. So we just were in a great position to say no. If the situation was different and we were burning cash and with a lot of pressure, we will say yes to the board, we will say yes to the 1.8, and we will say yes probably to other conditions because we needed the money. So the most important thing is to be good with your cash management so you don't need the money. You want the money, but you don't need it.
So let's go into cash management. Do you have any sort of principles that you find yourself repeating either to your leadership team or to the wider team around how you manage your company finances?
Yes. So basically, my co-founder and myself, we discuss a lot in terms of budget, and we go line by line. For example, how can we save money this month? So we can cut on these tools. Are we using these tools? Yes or no? So for some founders and for some entrepreneurs, that will be like going too much into the detail. But for us, it's been good because that helps us to take care of every penny. So we have this saying inside Retorna, we say, take care of the pennies because the millions will take care of themselves, right? So if you want millions, you need to save the pennies. So we focus on, we say, oh, we need to cut the number of accounts that we have on Google. And that was like $14. But we have those kind of conversations because the more that we cut cost in terms of things we were not using, the more efficient we were. And the mindset of the company was to use the resources in the most efficient way possible. Also, a second thing that I will say is we negotiate hard. So I still remember one time we were having our first advertisement on the radio, and we had around like $5,000 in budget for that, which was very cheap and completely unrealistic. And I went to the meeting with the provider, and it was, I don't know in dollars how it was, but it was 60 million pesos for like 3 mentions on the radio. And I spoke with my co-founder, and he told me, no, just offer 20. And we start the conversation with 20 so we can close in 30. And I was like, no, Juan, we cannot do that. That's like, I cannot do 20 if they quote for 60. Just do it. And send the email, and the guy say yes. And I was like, what? So after that, I just learned we just need to negotiate hard so we can, close to a budget that we are comfortable with in terms of finance. If we cannot do it, we will not overspend. And that's just taking care of the pennies. Now it's more flexible. Like now we don't focus on the Google accounts anymore. But, in the beginning, just created the mindset for the people that work in Retorna to use efficiently the money and to take care of every penny.
Lesson number 5 is from Miguel McKelvey, who co-founded WeWork, on what does it really mean to change the world?
Every ambition has a perimeter. And that's part of why I find it kind of funny when we used to say all the time, like entrepreneurs, I think, I want to change the world. And I really, that kind of annoys me in a sense that people say that, because like, what does changing the world really mean? I mean, and who has changed the world? Like, I'm sure that there are arguments for how Uber changed the world, for example, but like, has it, I don't know. You could still take a taxi before. Now you can take an Uber. I don't know. It's not, the world hasn't changed that much. So I think it's more the definition of what that means that kind of gets under my skin a little bit. But whatever. I'm not carrying too heavily.
What does it mean to you?
I think that we can each, play our own role in our existence. And if we do it with agency and we're proactive, that we can impact other people. And we can impact their experience for sure, in perhaps terms that go longer than our lifespan, but the world seems to operate just fine without any one of us. And even if Walmart, one of the biggest companies in the world, collapsed tomorrow, everything would be fine. Like, people would just keep living, right? Or if JP Morgan, collapsed tomorrow, like, do you think we wouldn't still be living the next day? Like, I don't know. Like, who cares really? Even if all the internet systems went down and we didn't have an iPhone in our hand, like, would we be all right? Yeah. So I guess that's part of where I guess it's just, maybe it's a definition of what it means and why it matters. And I think I see that as more ephemeral than I used to. I used to think that these things were more permanent. And I think as I've seen more cycles, I feel like they're everything changes. Changes much faster than we expect, actually.
Especially if you look on a much longer time horizon.
Yeah, but even that time horizon is getting shorter now, right? For massive change, I think, in terms of the way we see things. Like, I mean, even the way the US president can shorten what it means to take action from presidential political. Like, he's showing that ways we perceive things were completely different, or AI and the way it's affecting our current existence is moving much quicker than the way we thought was, possible to sort of change fundamental interactions, with information and technology. So I think those cycles are getting much faster, or I think those smarter people than me are saying that. But again, what I go back to is I can, for the most part, exist without consciousness of those things, and I'm okay. And so when I think about changing the world, it's usually has to do with human consciousness that would actually be a change. And so far, no one's been able to do that. No startup founder's been able to do that.
What does human consciousness mean to you?
A kind of collective awareness of our shared existence and our interdependency and our need for each other. And in a, not in a intellectual sense, but in a literal, like, biological sense, that we're all part of a system. And I don't mean that in any kind of spiritual way. I just sort of see that as, like, it's a natural system, and it's impossible to deny the fact that we're sort of recycled, beings. We're playing a part in some kind of infinite, in our understanding of time, experiment of regeneration. So without a different application of meaning to that we all take hold of together, it's hard to see changing the world. Now, I don't mean that you can't, obviously, from a small community to a cult to a religion to a blank, can definitely impact a lot of people. I just want to be really clear. When I say change the world, I'm just saying that, like, the Mongolians could give a fuck about Uber. You know what I mean? That's what I mean more. Well, I'm sure I don't know if there's Uber in Mongolia, but my point being is that, like, there are people existing on different planes. And when I say changing the world, I don't just mean that you got 100 million customers, right? Like, that's not changing the world. That's just building a, large business.
As a little bonus lesson, this is another one from Tom Foster Carter, who is the ex-COO of Monzo, which is an unreleased episode coming out very soon, on how going slow to go fast is actually maybe not the right route, and how we should just go fast and readjust and learn by doing.
There's this balance between moving quickly, but then also going slow to go fast. If you go quickly in the wrong direction, you're still going in the wrong direction. And actually, it's not helpful that you're moving quickly. And so you going slow to go fast was doing this customer validation with every product cycle.
Yes, I actually slightly disagree with that statement. Am I allowed to?
Please, yeah, amazing.
Okay. It's just the thing that I have figured out over doing 4 startups is, for the most part, running, even in the wrong direction a bit, overall is faster, which is kind of fascinating. And I don't know if this kind of goes against everything that everybody else out there says, but this is just my view on things. And I think it is a waste of time to knock out features that haven't been validated. That is mostly just not a clever use of your most precious resource, which is your engineer's time. But I've seen teams just debate, and I've been part of those debates and just opinions really going back and forth, where we're really worried about getting something wrong. And overall, in every single case, it's always been better to just get into it. Always. It's always better to just actually start moving. And the only thing that you need for that to work is a very quick correcting process as you get more data. So what's happening if you are stuck in, we have a thing called data over debate, and that's sometimes been misused. Or what that really means is go quickly to get data by kind of getting cracking, rather than have people just going back and forth with opinions, because opinions are just worthless. Like, we've all got them. And mostly my opinions are wrong. I've realized it's actually just every time, like, go get the data, and you do that by getting in the game. So I absolutely now advocate and tell anybody else, just get in the game, and you will figure it out much, much quicker than if you stand there being like, oh, but is that the wrong direction? It's just like, you just so quickly know it's the wrong mountain, because nothing is working in the way that you thought it was going to be. Then just get back down it and get back up another one. And you're still faster than the team that's sat there being like, oh, look at that mountain. Is that the right one? Or is that the right one? It's just like, let's just go, get climbing.
So there was the top 6 lessons from previous guests. And now I'm going to go into the next 5 lessons on how I've pretty much ignored all of those pieces of advice, ironically, and I've built the wrong thing well and paid the painful price. So here are the top 5 lessons I have taken from unsuccessfully building a content business that hopefully you can avoid or learn from. Number 1, define the product before building the audience. So a bit of context. Before I started this, I was running the UK's, I was about to say the world's most compassionate, it's a bit of a big claim, but the UK's most compassionate community of entrepreneurs called Founders, which was amazing, a deeply connective experience, and it introduced me to the world of community building and deep connections, and just expanded my network of just wonderful, wonderful entrepreneurs in the UK and Europe. And eventually my time there came to an end, and I decided that I needed to leave. But I didn't have the next step planned. I didn't have the next job lined up, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but that's how I did it, and here we go. And so I ended up interviewing with arguably the world's best VC to become, help run community for them. Went through 5 rounds of interviews. I was really excited. And then they just went completely cold on me, which was a hard pill to swallow. But what then happened is that it led me to ask the question of, okay, I'm back at square one. What would I do if money were no object? And the only reason that I'm able to ask this question is because when I was very young, my dad passed away. And because he was on duty in the army at the time, he had a life insurance payout, which when I was 9 went into a bank account for me. Now, I had a very, as you can imagine, weird relationship with that pot of money, and so I didn't touch it for 18 years. Whereas at this point, I didn't have the next job lined up. I'd just been rejected by this big world-class VC, or blanks, I think is a better phrase. And so then I thought, okay, well, if money were not object, if I could potentially use this money, how would I spend it? What do I really want to do? And I really wanted to interview entrepreneurs. I wanted to get deep and learn from the best of the best. And so that's what I did. And the rationale, the story that I told myself, which I've figured out I'm quite good at telling myself a story and believing it, was that if I build an audience, that is leverage for future company building. So if I build an audience, then that would help me with hiring, with fundraising, with selling, lots of different ripple effects that come from having an audience, which I'm sure you've seen from these great content creators. Now, that is all well and good if you know what you're going to sell that audience. You need to understand the full funnel and who you're serving. And I knew that I wanted to serve entrepreneurs. I just didn't know how. And because I didn't have the clarity on what the end product was going to be that I was going to drive an audience towards, then that meant that I was just looking to build a media business. And so how media businesses work is that you build a large audience and then you advertise other people's products on that, and you take a commission through either affiliate or brand partnerships, and you need lots and lots of eyes and impressions in order for that business to work. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And that is a very long game to get to that stage. Like, all of these big content creators have spent years and years building up their audiences. And so only then does it make sense that they'll get paid 10 to 50 to 100 grand for a mention, like this podcast is sponsored by Athletic Greens, which I didn't have at the start. And so it was just pouring money down the drain, trying to build this audience. And then if you only focus on trying to build an audience, that then splits your incentives away from necessarily adding deep value to a niche, very specific audience, to trying to get virality. And this lands on a spectrum. You can do both. It's just very, very hard, and it takes a long time to learn it. But pushing for virality, generally you lean into more controversial topics, you lean into more generalized topics, things that are just trying to spark a conversation or people sharing it. And that often isn't deep value adding. That is just sort of what news publications and people like Trump have been pushing for a long time. And so I have realized over time that I wanted to add deep value to a smaller group of people. And so trying to push for this media business, which needs tons of eyeballs, doesn't work. And instead, it makes a lot more sense to know the product you're going to sell, that niche audience first, and then build the audience around that. Lesson number 2, distribution is 50% of the game. Years ago, I read a book called Traction, which is by 2 guys called Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mares, or Mares. It's got a guy running on it on the front cover. And that is a great book all around the 19 different marketing channels that you can use, which is a great wake-up call to the fact that there are tons of marketing channels, and so you shouldn't get too attached to one, or at least have a good overview of your different options before investing a lot of time and energy into one, because each business works with different types of marketing channels, and so you might be sleeping on the best marketing channel for your business. Now, distribution is 50% of the game. This applies to both a product and a podcast. And that's the opening chapter of this book, is that most people spend way too much time on production, on refining the perfect product before trying to release it out to the market. Whereas they say that you need to spend half your time building and then half your time distributing and get that feedback loop and flywheel turning, because only through feedback can you refine the product. And this is where I made a fatal mistake. With the podcast, I spent so much time recording tons of interviews and not even posting them, thinking that I was doing the right thing with refining my craft and getting the best guests and, all that jazz. Again, telling myself a great story that I ate up. And the other challenge with podcasts is that I assumed building this media business and building this podcast is that I was going to learn distribution. And that was also going to help me with my future company building. So I was going to be the marketing, distribution, growth guy. And podcasts don't have distribution built into them as a form of media. Because when you go on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you don't there's not good discoverability. You don't find new podcasts that way. On YouTube, you can do sometimes, but the most way that people find podcasts is through social media, like shorts on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or things on LinkedIn. And I didn't spend anywhere near enough time focusing on that side of the business, distributing the podcast to know whether the types of guests and the conversation that we were having were valuable to the people that I was trying to serve. And so I just built in a little bubble, whistling my tune, thinking that everything was all dandy, and it wasn't. And I was pouring money down the drain, going bye-bye, and it was painful. It's now painful. And so if I was to do it again, I would treat distribution as half my time spent and as production, and think about just a week's work in terms of 50% production, 50% distribution. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Lesson number 3, working in a bubble is a slow and painful death. I have largely been working alone from a high level strategic point of view. I have a couple of editors that I've been working with who take my guidance, but I've had no one challenging my strategy and logical process until recently. And I knew that something was off for months, but I just became blinkered and laser focused and just thought I need to just keep on pushing, put more content out there and it will work. And eventually it didn't. And I have one of my very good friends called Costa who recently had to close down a company, but he's an excellent operator. We had a half day where we went through my strategy and he ripped it to pieces and really highlighted the fact that it wasn't working and it hadn't worked. This experiment that I'd run where I'd pretty much angel invested in myself. And he said, if you had sunk this money into someone else and they'd spent 18 months and hadn't built an audience and hadn't made any money and you looked at it as an investment, then you'd be questioning, what the fuck is going on? What are you doing? And so when he put it like that, I was like, oh, yep, okay. That makes sense. I have been in a bubble. And so if I was going to do it again, I would have built a personal board of advisors around me to challenge my strategy and logic and keep me coming back to the main thing. Because the main thing is keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is building an audience of relevant people that you're trying to target and being able to monetize them. That is what's necessary. The cost of isolation is delusion. Lesson 4, pushing harder often isn't the answer. I've taken a long break now after posting the Miguel episode, which is episode 49, the co-founder of WeWork. And I have really pumped the brakes. I've done a lot of self-work. I've been doing somatic therapy, which is where your body stores stress and trauma in the body. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, and that talks about this. And so a somatic therapist tries to release that tension and trauma and allows the energy to flow more through your body. It's a bit woo-woo, but I actually love it and have become a lot more woo-woo recently. And so previously, leading up to this point, I thought, I'm behind, I just need to work harder, I need to push through, and that just caused me to be very blinkered. Now, the thing I've learnt through somatic therapy is when we're stressed and we have these low sort of humming levels of anxiety, insecurity, and fear, they cause us to contract our mind and our focus, which doesn't allow us to think expansively. And so that is where I have just been in this tunnel vision and haven't been able to step out and look at the big picture and ask the foundational questions from first principles. And so that has been a massive mistake. And so what I did was just try to overcompensate with working super long 70-hour weeks. But I was working hard on the wrong thing, and no amount of effort fixes a broken business model. And so all of this effort has just clouded my judgment. You build sunk cost fallacy, and I wasn't working smart on the right thing. I was working hard on the wrong thing. And that was a huge mistake. Lesson 5 is about the finances, where I've spent intelligently, where I have spent unwisely. And I will do a quick Loom video to run you through my P&L and where I think I've spent well and where I haven't. So we'll jump over to that. I'm going to go through the major costs and where I think I've made mistakes with spending money in this business. So we won't dwell too much here because these are the income and the revenue. And as we can see, that will be 0. And the other things which seem like 0 on here, but actually they're not, it's not quite accurate because I'm not as disciplined as I'd like to be with updating this spreadsheet, is the cost of sale. And in this case, it will be cost per episode. And I do spend some money on food per guest, but I just haven't recorded it and put it into here. So that's one mistake that I made. The next part is that this is how much I've paid myself over the course of the years. It's actually not as much as that because I haven't paid myself this much because we are only in October. And so this will actually be the same as that. And so I don't even think I'll pay myself that much, but that's the rough target. And I don't sort of have a clear, I take this much money from this account and I put it into my personal account. That doesn't happen, which is mistake number 2. So then, staff salaries. This is interesting. I'm going to move myself over here because this is the biggest cost in these businesses. And so I have a separate salaries tab. And we have 3 different team members. 2 of them are editors. One of them was my LinkedIn VA. And you can see these are sort of projected months. And so that's why they're not clean. And you can see that there's been a massive drop off from here to here because I realized I was spending too much money and therefore I had to stop, or I just did stop, which was the good thing that I did. So this has been the biggest cost of the entire business, staff costs, and how much of it was necessary. So Chris has been very necessary, but originally he was full-time, and that wasn't entirely necessary. So he comes each day that I do filming, and he's sort of like the producer and then editor and videographer, and it takes so much off my plate, which is incredible, and he's generally amazing. And so that's why we've sort of cut him down from every day of the month through to like just the days that we're filming, which has made a massive impact on the P&L. And so that was the other thing which helped. The other thing is we had a previous animator in Brazil who is editor and animator, and he's been consistent, but generally much cheaper because he was in Brazil, which is also great. He's now left the business, and I've got someone else who has started, and they're even cheaper, and they're just hitting a higher performance. But the point being here is that staff are the biggest costs. If you're able to save costs on staff, then that makes the biggest impact on the business. My LinkedIn VA, LinkedIn wasn't driving enough in terms of traffic to the podcast, and so therefore I had to make the tough decision that actually I didn't need someone to post for me or like publish my posts daily on LinkedIn, because I've stopped doing LinkedIn for the past month to reflect on it all. And so therefore I don't know if I will use her again, but that is part of it. So good September, it'll be a good October, but previous months it has been expensive, and that has been the biggest cost of the business. Going back to here, we have CapEx and startup costs. This is the other big cost. Now, we haven't got the previous years from before, but when we did, there were some large equipment costs, cameras, microphones, equipment to film the podcast. I started off by spending 10 grand on this, which was one of the biggest costs. However, it was worthwhile. It was worth the investment. Start off with great cameras, great microphones, especially if I knew that I was going to be doing this for a long time. And so that made sense. So I'm happy about that. Other costs here, Frame is absolutely necessary. Adobe was absolutely necessary. OpenAI, Google Cloud, all of these things I'm pretty satisfied with. And some of them, moving the screen, some of them are not realized and some of them are realized. So yeah, pretty happy. You can pause this and look at any of these costs and see which ones you think are necessary, which ones you think are not. But I'm pretty happy with all of these. That is most of it. General staff costs is just a summary of all of these. Like my accountant's £150 a month, bank charges £5 a month. Other costs, I got a trademark for the brand. But yeah, that is the summary of the P&L. Here is all of the losses, the total losses this year, 65 grand. Last year, slightly less. But there we go. That's the P&L. So those are the top 5 lessons from building a podcast and media business wrong, wasting a ton of money and a lot of time and energy, and facing failure in the face, and feeling exhausted by it. And so hopefully you can take something from that. I've learned that actually a lot of the time I have to do the failure myself in order to feel it and learn it on a deeply subconscious emotional level. And so hopefully you're better than me and you can take lessons from my failures and you don't have to make them yourself. Now, the last bit is a general reflection on building and psychology and awareness. And my self-reflection journey that I've been on over the past 6 weeks has led to lots of big revelations and helpful understandings of myself, which I think is one of life's best journeys, is connecting with ourselves and others, because that means that we can build from a place of strong, grounded foundations. The first lesson is around building for the wrong timeline. So I ran Founders, the community of 400 entrepreneurs, whose average age is around 40, and their average stage of business is around Series A. I went into that as a 24-year-old, young, hungry, energetic founder who had never built anything significant, never raised any money or built a big team or anything like that. But I still compared myself to those founders at that stage of life and business, which doesn't make any sense. And so I have constantly felt behind. Now, what this led me to think is that I am late to building a venture-backed business, and that's what I need to do. So building this podcast helps me build the leverage and the skills around distribution such that when I go build my next VC-backed startup, I will finally be on track and I'm reaching my potential. And what I avoided was building a great business today, as opposed to like planning for the future. And so the question I wish I'd asked myself was, what do I actually want to build now that could last a long time? That I don't feel drawn to this story that I have to build this type of company, but instead just build around the problem that I'm fascinated on and for people that I want to serve. So that would have been a great lesson from the start. Lesson number 2 is understanding my insecurities. One big one has been that I am not intelligent enough. And this has manifested in one way, which seems great on the surface, which is a perpetual beginner's mindset. I'm intensely curious and always really keen to learn, but half of that comes from this scarcity of not feeling intelligent enough, which, if we're getting really deep, goes back to being psychologically bullied at school and not feeling able to come up with a quick comeback to various people who were just berating me when I was younger. And so that then made me feel like very tense in those moments and questioning like, why couldn't I just come up with a quick answer to these arse who give me all the time. And so, yeah, understanding that I didn't trust my own intelligence, my own internal wisdom, and realizing that that came from a place of fear and insecurity and lack, as opposed to a place of abundance. And I think a lot of the best work that we as founders can do is understanding where our motivations come from and whether they are actually rooted in some sort of scarcity or an abundance. And I think far too many of us are pushing to build something and feel a sense of worthiness based on a lack that we had when we were younger. And the danger is that if we understand this driving force, then it will take our drive away. And all the beautiful things that have come with our drive, like the people that we've met and the wealth that we've built and whatever it is, that will also disappear. Whereas I think that is a very short-term false economy. And actually, if we find the thing that we're truly passionate about from a deep, grounded, foundational level, then we'll build something far bigger than anything we would have done from a shaky, insecure foundation. Lesson number 3 is the cognitive dissonance and the gap between who I appeared to be and who I was. Cognitive dissonance is when you are saying one thing or believing one thing and not living up to it. That's how I understand it. And publicly, I wanted to appear wise and intelligent and ask great questions. And privately, I felt lost and directionless and generally exhausted and wondering why the business wasn't taking off. And that gap between how I was wanting to appear externally and how I was feeling internally created a bunch of shame. And that shame then led to this isolation and not reaching out for help as often as I could have done. And so then when the Miguel episode flopped, well, not quite flopped, but like didn't take off and was this like exponential success that I was hoping it was, I felt the full weight of that gap. And so the general lesson here is to close the gap as early as possible and be very honest about where you are, because no one's As long as you're surrounded by the right people, they're not going to judge you for being honest about your shortcomings. If anything, they're going to respect the honesty and the humility, and then they're going to want to help even more. And getting that consistent help and support, I think, helps course correct, and we can hopefully learn from other people's experiences, like I haven't done. And so lesson number 4 was not living the advice that I was getting from all of these interviews. These lessons are so rich. And if I had taken time to pause and actually reflect and think, how am I going to apply this lesson to my business? Let's do some actual work on this, as opposed to thinking, that's a great soundbite. Super interesting. Julia Metcalf or Bernard or Atalana or Sharmadean. Love that. And then forget about it the next day, or don't apply it to my own situation. That is not learning. That is just mental masturbation. And I think so much of us do it when we obsessively listen to all these podcasts or read these books and don't apply the lessons. What a waste of time. And I've been telling myself I've been building, because I'm building the podcast and building a content machine. But actually, if you don't apply the lessons, then what is the point of it all? And so having that feedback loop, or building that feedback loop for myself within this business, would have been far more powerful. And that ultimately comes down to like, how well can you learn from other people's experiences and not have to make the failures yourself in order to really learn them. And that, I think, is a lifelong art and skill that is so powerful. How can you hear something and then immediately go, great, I'm going to apply that today, which I have not been good at. But this is a turning point, so hopefully I'll get better at it. Lesson number 5 is that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the entrance fee we need to pay. I have paid a very expensive £100,000 entrance fee to hopefully push me along the path towards success. And also, I have been framing it throughout this whole episode as failure. And really, it's not failure. It's just like one big experiment. And really, isn't life just one big experiment? But we won't go down that rabbit hole today. And I have had great lessons from this all, and as I'm sharing with you today, and maybe I wouldn't have had those if I hadn't spent all this money and this time. And so failure is just part of the process, and that is what I need to learn to love more. One of my guests, James Routledge, who was episode number 2 or 3 actually, he has a great attitude towards failure. That's actually one of the most popular episodes. You just go and watch that. And he speaks about how he just loves failure. And so that is what I'm learning to do, and just understand that failure means learning, and learning is one of the most amazing gifts that we get to divulge in life. So yeah, it's been painful, but we've come out the other side, we've reflected, I feel re-energized, ready to go again with a lot more knowledge and wisdom under the belt. And so the future looks bright. And so what is the future of this podcast? Now, I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not going to sort of make big claims and goals, because I think those are sort of self-indulgent, and I've done those a lot in the past, where I've been like, I'm going to do this big thing, and people go like, wow, that sounds great, and that gives me a nice dopamine hit. Whereas actually, I haven't thought long and hard enough about what the goal should be. And realistically, goals change, and circumstances change, and contexts change. And so now, part of somatic therapy, what I'm learning is to flow more with life. And then I question, like, how can you build while also flowing? Like, it's flowing through life, not just like being drifted, pulled by the wind, and not actually pushing forward and achieving things, which I have learnt is not the case. You can still create structures and goals and direction, but also flow through them and not be so rigid in how we approach these things. And so that is my approach going forward. What feels true to now with regards to the podcast is to not stick to a rigid posting schedule. It's to do quality over quantity. It's to shoot for bigger and better guests. And start building the product that I'm going to direct people to. These are both going to be very long journeys, but we are very excited for them. It's been painful to get here to date, but we've learnt a ton, and I thank you so much that you're still here listening. And if you've listened to previous episodes, thank you again. It honestly means the absolute world to me. This has been a massive journey. It's been a tough journey using the money that was from my dad's life insurance policy to try and make this a reality, and it hasn't quite worked. But we're still here. We're still kicking and screaming. Not quite screaming, not there yet. But yeah, honestly, you being here listening, although I'm literally just chatting to a camera and speaking to a microphone, I feel your presence. And so thank you so much. It honestly means the world. If you can share this with a friend, if you can if you can give me any sort of feedback, that'd be amazing. And that's how this flywheel turns and how this business ticks over. Anyway, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. And I will see you at episode 51.